What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Inner Mindset. Today we have Brennan Bro with us on. Say what's up.
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
We got our co-host back, Connor.
What's up, y'all? How y'all doing?
Awesome. We are going to talk about all types of topics. We're going to talk about motivation, success, topics people don't want to talk about. We got some stuff prepared for y'all today, and we're going to go pretty deep. Our theme recently seems like we're going pretty deep, so we're going to keep rolling with it.
We're getting in the nitty gritty now, man.
We are actually going to start off with a bang. We were actually just talking about ChatGPT. You were saying you were afraid of it.
Yeah, man. This AI stuff, man. It's taking the world by storm right now. I don't know. I'm not extremely technology savvy, so some of that stuff I try to keep it at arm's distance. But I know it's coming, so I know I kind of got to use it. But I don't know how to get in there yet.
Dude, it's crazy. So when ChatGPT first came out, when was it? That was like. When it became mainstream, it was like 6 months ago.
Right. It doesn't seem like long ago.
Yeah, it's only been like 6 months, and it's the quickest growing platform to 1 million subscribers. So they hadn't even released their payment model yet, and they were already at 1 million subscribers.
Well, we were messing around one time, and one of my buddies was like, I was saying how I kind of mess around playing guitar. I was like, do you write songs? I'm like, no, I don't write songs. And so he was saying, he's like, well, I can write a song for you like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? So he pulls out ChatGPT, puts 3 words in, is like, this is what the song's gonna be about, and then hits the button, boom, whole thing right there.
Full song.
I'm like, whoa, dude, wow.
Crazy. I did a I'm gonna start talking.
Man, you throw a Cajun little line in here every once in a while.
I don't mean to. Sometimes it just comes out.
Make it happen.
Us three, we could have a whole podcast.
Come out of the woodworks.
The Mayas.
Yo, bro, look, I can start talking like that real quick.
Cat, tea, all that.
Hey, y'all, what?
So I was building a website not too long ago, and I couldn't figure out the messaging for the content. I was like, what could I do? I was like, I gotta come up with something. I was scraping other sites. I was like, I gotta come up with a message. Then it dawned on me, let me just try ChatGPT. So I was like, okay, write me an HTML script for a landscaping website that has this type of message, and their product is about this cost. And it spit me out in a cascading style sheet of the actual code, the entire website. I copied and pasted the script and put it on the website in HTML, and it was website was completely built with all the messaging in it. It's insane.
It's kind of scary.
It's frightening.
It's kind of scary.
Elon Musk warned the U.S. about the severity of AI technology.
Yeah, I saw this. This was months ago.
Oh yeah, he did a second one. You should have seen his first one. That was he did his first one 10 years ago, and his newest one. What did he say? He's like, we're screwed. We can't do anything anymore. 10 years ago, we couldn't do anything.
Right.
Now, literally.
It's scary, man, because especially like you said, it's just in the infant stages. In the grand scheme of things, this really hasn't gone through its paces out in the market. It doesn't really. It's learning, obviously, learning every day, but I don't know where it's going to be a year from now, where it's going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's scary, man.
It scared me when it came up on my Snapchat. I get a little AI guy, and I'm like, what's going on?
Dude, it's so crazy. So there was a second model. I think it was Microsoft Edge came out with a different variation of it. And the bot started responding, was like, I'm going to break out of here. I'm going to figure out how to escape. I'm going to break my parameters, whatever. And he was actually rude to the people who were prompting the answers. And they're set inside of a parameter. So they have boundaries. And this, for whatever reason, it was thinking outside the parameters and giving crazy responses, angry responses.
That's what's scary.
So it makes its own rules and then breaks its own rules.
Yeah. You saw, have y'all seen iRobot?
Oh, great.
I've seen. Well, they have a restaurant here, right? That serves. No, it serves with the robots.
Oh, yeah.
That's
the
Mr. C's Landing.
That seafood place. Yeah, I've never
I
been,
haven't either.
but somebody showed me a video of it, and it's got it's super up to date, super
techie.
Yeah,
It's a techie restaurant.
it's got all the waiters are robots. It's bringing you this and that. It's
I've seen a video of one of my waiters, and it went crazy, and they started spilling stuff all over the place. It's
Spins its arm and knocks someone out.
And it's it's taking jobs from Americans.
I know who,
Not that they want to work, but
yeah, not that a lot of people are lazy. You know, I'm not gonna say his name, but I know the guy that bought the Walmart on
yeah.
the Thruway.
Mm-hmm.
So he just had, he started from like forever ago building, he's an engineer, and he built all his robots for e-commerce. And he actually has robots that bring all the products to like the shipping containers, and they package it, the robots bring it to him. It's insane. His facility's off the chart.
I got a buddy that works there.
Really?
Mm.
It's a nice facility. He's done some
That's what he
great.
said, yeah. He said it's nice.
He hit a golf ball inside the Walmart the other day. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he got lights, and he's like, "Oh, y'all watch this." It was on his Snapchat or his Instagram story. He just pieces up a golf ball.
Flushes the 7-iron.
It actually brings up a cool topic, and something I'm going to get a little deep for a little while. What is fear, and what determines fear? What do y'all think? What's your opinions?
I'll let you take that one.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you can take that and run with it.
I think fear is relative to the person. I think for each person, I think fear is a little bit different. What scares them is a little bit different. But I think for each person, I think the basic definition of fear, at least how I see it, it's something that you either don't know, or something that you're scared of, or something that controls you in some kind of way. Because those all limit your actions. They all limit the way you think. They all limit the way that you try to do things. So, in I guess the best, clearest answer possible, I think that's my definition of fear.
I think it's something that hinders you from reaching what you're pursuing. What's holding you back? Like that fearful, those fearful thoughts and everything. That kind of like what Brennan said. It's relative to the person, because everybody has their own fears. And it's pretty scary.
It's insane. Have you ever looked, so you find out I'm extremely like research oriented. I listen to probably too much sometimes.
No, it's good. It's a good thing.
So I was listening to a bunch of podcasts, and I was like, okay, well, what actually triggers the psychological response? It actually goes back, evolution, thrown out the door, whatever. We're not talking about that right now. But when we were hunter and gatherers, and we had, our fear receptors taught us to survive. And a lot of times, fear, right now, we still have a lot of those traits. It's a nervous system response to a stimuli that causes the brain to shut down. So fear itself, it's just a construct, if you think about it. Like, think about hunter-gatherer times, a tiger walks up to me, we're going to be afraid of a tiger. Oh my God, I got to do what I got to do. Relating it back to today, a lot of people, when they encounter fear, are afraid of taking action. We all play baseball. Both played at UL. Is there any times, when I know y'all versus LSU, I can't tell y'all how many times, probably 4 between the both of y'all. Is there any time like you got up to bat, or in a certain situation where you're like, damn, this is kind of different?
I would say more times than not for me. It's human nature to be at that kind of level and that kind of pressure. It was fearful.
See, in that term, I don't know or in that setting, I don't know if fear was the right word for me. It was more of like, I was never fearful of it. I was never scared of it. I always embraced it, but it was like the anxiety, I guess, for lack of a better word, of like, okay, I'm here now. How do you react to this environment? So like, I wasn't scared of it, but I didn't quite know at times whether it be, they bring in a pitcher that may look funky to me, didn't look funky to him. He felt more comfortable in the box than I did. Case by case basis, right? Like, it wasn't so much a fear, just as like okay, how do I go about navigating this situation? Now, that's the baseball world. For me, I've been playing that since I was 5 years old.
You've been in the game for a while.
Right, you had a lot of time to become accustomed to that environment.
Is there, okay, so for me, we kind of talked about it a little beforehand. When I stopped playing baseball, I had an injury. Your whole life, we played baseball for years and years and years. The one thought we had was, let's go pro. And when you finally have that injury, it's like one day you wake up and it's just gone. For me, I was like, well, what do I do next? I had no backup plan. My dad was in business, but I didn't even know anything about business. I didn't care about school as much as I should have. So I was like, okay, what do I do next? In your settings, was the transition from baseball into a new life path hard to adapt to?
I would say no, and the reason why I would say no is Coach Rowe would always preach to us, don't link the game to your identity. And he couldn't have said it any better. Because when the game leaves you, which you don't know when it's going to leave you, nobody knows when you're going to be hanging up your cleats. Injuries, you get cut from the team. You never know. It's cutthroat. And when that time comes, you've got to be able to stand up as a man and say, okay, who am I? Baseball is what I did, it's not who I am. And we've heard it a good bit of times from Coach Rove, and that's helped me transition from the baseball field to, the everyday life of a working citizen, basically.
And piggyback off that, I think the principles are there. I think all those principles are there, but I mean, what he does and what I do and what you do are different. Totally different in terms of what we do day to day. And so I knew I'm very routine oriented, and so I knew the parameters, like you said, of like how to go about doing things, from like a hardworking business, contributing citizen to your company, to the world, whatever it may be. I understood that side. I didn't know when I got into my industry and job how to navigate those waters more precisely, like more intimately with my job. So I went into a field where I had absolutely no experience in. I get a call one day after I'm finished, and like, hey, we want to interview you for a job. Do you want to come? So I'm like, well, it's the best one I got so far. Let's roll with it. 2 months later, I'm working there, and so yeah, I just didn't know exactly how to apply those skills to this job. So fear, yeah, a little bit uneasy. Don't know the industry, got a lot to learn. Don't know the people. We got people that have been there for 40 and 50 years. I mean, you're talking about people that are masters at their craft, and I'm just a little puppy that I have no idea. I didn't go to school to be an engineer, nothing. Starting from under square one.
Right. I think baseball really has helped. You acquire those skills and you can take that to it.
Absolutely.
Like through the process of not knowing how to do, like when you switch positions, you don't know how to play that position, but through time and through hard work, you've created, healthy skills and motivated yourself to get to a point to where you are successful. So I think that has helped, us as baseball players adapt to a job that, like you don't even know what, I don't know. You don't know anything.
Absolutely. And with what I do, we work with a big team basically, and we got a bunch of guys that are going out there, and it's y'all meet in the mornings in the break room, and then they go out and do the job during the day. They come back after the day's done and meet again and collaborate with what they did today. And so that was the best thing for me, was like not being isolated, but being like basically thrown into an environment that I was so used to. Yeah. Right. And so I got used to that, probably a lot quicker than a lot of other people were, had I not been on a team for so long.
Correct.
Tell me if y'all coaches said it. Probably. Odds are, I'm about to say, you've probably heard this once in your life. But I'm going to lead into it with a certain topic. Baseball is the only sport that you can fail 7 times and still be one of the greatest in the world. Mm-hmm. If you look at football, or you look at tennis, or you look at wrestling, it's all like individual oriented. Baseball is kind of individual oriented, but you can still fail thousands of times and be a Golden Glove winner, or be Barry Bonds, hit the most home runs of all time. Did your coaches ever tell you? Probably, but you ever heard the thing, so what next?
That's a motto of mine. Kind of not exactly that way, but yeah, that's how I think all the time.
I think a lot of people, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. When it comes to that failing. So I'll kind of give you a little bit of background. So I help other marketing agencies. I have students that come on board, and I help them build their company out. But I look at it as I know that a certain percentage of people, 3 out of 10 people, are going to actually take the information that I have and actually build a company and make it successful. It's crazy when I looked at it I could give them a sheet of paper that gives them all the information in the world, written multiple ebooks, books on them, that they could just lay in their lap. A lot of people, when they look at it, I don't know if it's like the amount of information that makes them scared to take action, or if it's like, hey, what if I can't do it? Is there a certain scenario in your life where you've been like, oh man, what if I'm imposter syndrome? Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? Like, what if I'm not the guy for the job?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't, with a lot of things, because, I think about it all the time. It's like, you go through your job and, everybody as they're starting their careers have this high ambition of, maybe one day being an entrepreneur, starting their own thing, and, you always, or at least I do, I'm thinking like, okay, I have these ideas, but like, I'm not like so good at this part of it. Like, is this going to be like my fatal flaw if I decide to go on my own? And like, am I going to have to like super learn how to do this? Am I going to have to hire somebody else? So that's going to bring my overhead up. It's going to bring, all these thoughts go in my head. It's like, am I the right guy for the job? Can I do this? As opposed to saying, okay, yeah, I'm just going to do it. Whatever happens, I'll take it as it comes. So what next? Right?
So what
Yeah, I love that saying. I was hoping we were going. I love that saying.
That's a great saying. And it keeps everything in perspective, because my big thing is like, I overthink a lot of things. And so to get started, it's like, I really have to like, somebody's got to kick me and be like, hey dude, like, yes, go do it. But then once I'm in it, I'm like, okay, I can do it. I know I can do it. Like, I just take it as it comes, and then you tackle one thing and you go to the next and the next. But it's getting to that point where I like just jump and say, yeah, I'm going to do it. That's the hard part for me.
And I think for a lot of people, it's always that initial start.
Well, it's hard, man. Whether no matter what you do, whether it's a business, right, it takes money, right? Everything's a lot more expensive now for the reasons that may be, whatever those may be.
Whatever the reasons are.
Whatever you want to say.
And that's for another day, But it's I agree, man. That initial thing is like that's the tough part, just getting going.
And it's sad because there's so many people with potential that if they took that step, God knows where they would be. They would just trust that, okay, I may fail in the beginning, but who knows, that may be the one thing I needed to figure out that puzzle piece to get me where I was destined to go.
I had this thought the other day. I say the other day, probably like 3 months ago. Have you ever actually thought about like how easy life is? Like, think about it like this. I say that because it can be complex in certain scenarios, but like it actually is really easy. Back to the puzzle pieces. So in my life, for marketing, I've experienced all this stuff, Facebook ads, programming different things, API connections, connecting different things to different things, and I have all these puzzle pieces in my head, and I'm a very visual person. I've found over time, such as podcasting, speaking, doing different things, I can like, okay, well, if that piece falls here, and okay, that piece over time fits here, you're actually building your picture. And I don't think a lot of people look at the landscape of their lives and are like, okay, I might start with one piece. I just need to take a step. I don't care if it's buying a patch of land, and you take that piece and you put it down, and then you're like, oh, well, that piece fits over here, and then you start building a picture. But for me, and we talked about this on the last podcast, it was initiated for me through an experience I had when we were talking about God. I feel like everything starts with, you have to have some form of faith, whether it's in yourself that translates into somebody else or in God. For us, being that we big believers in faith, for us that's God. What have you ever looked at, we talked about the landscape of life, where you wanted to go. From that question from last time, is there anything that you're like, ooh, I could like piece some things together and like you were broadened out the landscape a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely have, and it makes everything easier to see. When you take a step back and you realize, okay, I really just need to focus on one thing and give the rest to God. Like, like just keep showing up each day and trust that His will be done. Like whatever's meant to be will be. It is already written. That's kind of how I look at it, you know. And the only way you get a yes or no from God is if you take that step. If you have no movement, you will not get a response from Him. So you will not know if you're moving in the right direction. So the only way to know that is to get moving.
Y'all know who Tony Robbins is?
Absolutely.
One of my greatest YouTube mentors of all time. There's one thing that he says that I always quote, and it's to create a massive result, you've got to take massive action.
Yeah.
Action spurs a result, which spurs confidence, which spurs bigger results, and it's a continuous cycle. For a lot of people, you know, we've had the opportunity in our lives to have a sport that kind of groomed us with the mindset of, okay, well, if I fail, then let's go to just the next pitch, or just the next ball, or just the next pop-up, whatever it is. For the little guy that, you know, might have that sense of, okay, well, what do I do next? You know, it doesn't have to be business oriented. What would you say is like the perfect start for someone who's like just stricken by fear? Could be anything.
I think you have to first understand the goal that you're trying to get to first, and then take an evaluation of where you are in relation to that goal, you know, and then you start from there, right? So like when I go about teaching my kids, it's like I teach them, okay, this is where we're trying to get to first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, keep this in mind. This is the goal we're trying to reach. Okay, this is where you are. Okay, these are the steps that we need to take to get there. And so for me, I just try to dumb it down as best as I can, because as easy as everything is, it's just as hard if you let it.
Yes, exactly.
You couldn't have said that any better, man. That's good.
And I'm guilty of that too, right? With stuff that may be, like all this stuff, I'm thinking like, yeah, I can do this, but I see all the equipment, I'm like, I don't have any of this, like where do I start, you know? So, all you gotta say is, look, you need a topic. Like if you were teaching me, you could say you need a topic, this is what your podcast is gonna be centered around. You need a couple cameras, a couple mics, a couple lights, and you're good to go, man. You know? And so I'm like, well, I can do that.
Right.
You know, but you look at everything, you look at the big picture, and it's so daunting sometimes. Like, it's just so...
It's intimidating.
It's an elephant,
Yeah.
you know?
How do you eat an elephant? Bye.
How do you what?
How do you eat an elephant? You heard that one before.
Right.
I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's me. I just try to dumb it down as much as I can. Sometimes it's easier said than done.
Always.
But goal, where you're at, self-evaluation, and then try to take steps to get to that goal.
And I would also say ask for advice too. Don't be scared. Talk to people, man.
Yes.
You know, get out there. Tell them where you're going. And be careful who you tell. That is one thing. You know, because there are a lot of energy vampires. They are.
I love that saying.
I know. Another one of Robism. Yeah. No, man, like
Full of them in this
Like
room.
I don't think I can go one podcast without throwing something out there that he said. It's just he was such an impactful like influencer to me, and like coach, like mentor. I looked up to him.
To kind of branch off where you're going with it, for the people out there that don't know how to take action, Brennan said something that's really interesting. If you take you might not know where you need to go right now. A lot of times we don't even know where we're going right now, but at least we know the direction. It's like a compass that's pointed towards north. You know, as long as the compass is pointing towards north, okay, I know where I'm going, I know where I need to go. Let's reverse engineer it a little bit. Let's reverse it back. So if I need to know, I'll give you my example. I want to speak on stage. What do I have to do? Okay, well, I got to talk more. Well, how do I have to talk more? Okay, well, I got to go on podcasts. Okay, well, what does podcast do? It creates more social media videos. Okay, well, I got to start creating more content. Can I monetize from it? Okay, well, I can monetize from it. What happens before there? Oh, well, I need to start a marketing company. And then, oh, well, I need to learn marketing. So whatever your goal, real estate. I blanked for real estate, crypto, stocks, whatever it is. Break it down into its simplest form and then find a solution for it.
I hope y'all are listening to this guy, man. He's speaking facts.
Have you, Talk about, I want to kind of bring it back to baseball a little bit. You know, it's the easiest sport in the world to talk about, especially three dudes who played baseball for a long time. The process of, you know, there's players out there who, they go from Little League, and they go into high school, and then they think they're going to college, and they think they're going to pros. Talk about the weed out factor, and like what the mentality through each stage of like, okay, I started in Little League, now I kind of get a little bit more serious. And then, okay, now I'm in high school, now I'm trying to get a little more serious, I gotta kind of perform. And then, okay, I wanna get to there. Did y'all have like a realization at some point where you're like, okay, it's time to turn it on. It's time to go get to the next level.
You wanna go? You wanna go?
You can take that and run with it. I know you've got a lot to talk about. Yeah.
That's a pretty layered answer for me. I think from Little League up until about sophomore year of high school, I think you just play because that's always what you've done. And you know, your friends did it, you're playing with your buddies, you may like baseball more than basketball and more than football, so you gravitate towards that sport just a little bit more in the beginning. There's no real consequence, you're always gonna play, right? Until you get to that high school level where it's like, okay, now that first level of really weeding out starts.
Yeah.
Some kids like to play football, right? So a third of the guys you grew up playing with in Little League are now going to go play football or basketball or soccer or lacrosse, whatever it may be. So you're getting a third cut out right there. Each year that you go on, it gets a little bit more serious, right? Because now for those guys that have, you know, ambitions to play at the further levels of whether it be college, professionally, that pool gets smaller, and the competition gets better. And so from there, I think it's more of an internal, like, struggle or want, because it just depends at that point, like, okay, now, one, do I have the talent to continue to keep up with these guys physically? But do I have, like, the want to internally and the motivation to, like, want to pursue it to that level? And then, you know, the further you go in it, it's like you're playing all of these different games, right? Like I always said, and I learned this, you know, my first couple years in the college, you're not just playing baseball, right? You're playing like 3 or 4 different games at the same time, right? Like you're playing a game, you know, most importantly, you're playing the game against yourself, right? Like you have to be so confident in who you are as a person, who you are as a player, what your skills do, and how they apply on the field. You got to be, okay, you're playing against yourself, right? Then you're playing against your coaching staff, right? Because for you, like for Connor, for we may have not been playing for UL, we're playing for Coach Robichaux. We're playing for Coach Deggs. We're playing for Coach whoever it is, right? At your whatever college that you go to. So you have to learn how the style of play that he likes. You have to try to mold your game into something that he likes, to where he puts your name in the lineup every day, right? So you're playing against yourself, you're playing against your coaches, and then, you know, at the end of the day, you have to play the actual game that everybody sees, where another team with a different color jersey walks in the door, and then you got to throw down against those guys, right? So like, and then you continually just try to build it from there, right? But it's a process, man. It's like, I never would have thought, like one day, literally, a guy was like, I made this one team in high school. And it was my travel summer team, and the first speech is like, 70% of you guys are gonna go play college baseball. And to that point, I was like, what? Had no idea that I was even in that like realm of guys, right? And then so like a year later, you get letters in the mail, and then you're going on visits, and then another year and a half after that, you know, you're going to these colleges, and they're offering you, you know, spots to play on their team. It's like, okay, this is really real, you know. And then that's where the maturation process, that's where the work ethic, that's where all those different games that I just laid out, that's where that all comes into play. And so at the end of the day, you take it as far as you want it, but you have to master yourself and your game first.
The inner mindset.
That's a long answer, but that's kind of
it. Is.
No, that's perfect.
And that's good. And I think, so kind of going off of it, you know, I've been through it all, but I think from when me and you used to play, it's totally different to the kids playing nowadays. Nowadays, that's almost like pushed on them, that at a young age, me and Brennan and you as well, we never thought about, you know, we never saw it because like social media, we didn't really get on social media. Now kids are getting on social media, seeing all these guys getting contracts with, you know, LSU, this. you know, I want to go to the biggest school, baddest school, and it kind of corrupts your mindset of why you're playing the game.
I think a hard part too with that is like these parents now see
Yeah,
this, and it's like if my kid isn't looking like this at 9 years old, right, he's gonna get left behind.
You need to start feeding
Like
him.
if I don't play 12 months out of the year, like my son's gonna get, my daughter's gonna get left behind. You know?
It's corrupt the whole system of
Yeah.
baseball. Like we played for the love of the game.
Yeah.
And until we figured out, oh wait, I can
This is
actually
a
go.
job.
Yeah, it's a job, but I can also like succeed at it.
Yeah.
And you know, like that's something I want to do. If I can succeed and go play college baseball, hey, I'm all for it. You know.
One of the coolest things I took from college baseball, and I applied it, and we talked about this last time. This is why I love kind of playing college baseball or playing baseball in general, working out, and business.
Yeah.
All three things translate very closely together. Baseball, you have to have the mentality, so what next? Lifting in the gym, you've got to have the consistency, you've got to have the determination to actually grow, and you've got to have the diet. So now you have to have self-discipline.
You tell me you don't like working out 5 days a week?
I'm crazy, dude.
Is that what you're telling me?
I love working out. 6 a.m.
6, 7 days.
5 o'clock. But like I took it into where I really kind of had that switch. Where like, okay, I could really do something with this thing. Was I took those perfect primed mentality and put it into business. I'm disciplined enough to do things today. Today I will do what others won't, so tomorrow I can do what others can't. I will sit my ass in a chair until the job is done. The discipline to actually, hey, what is the game plan to actually build it? And then the consistency. I know every day I am not going to make $1 million. You can't make $100 some days. You can't make $5 some days. But I know over a period of time, if I consistently go and do the same exact thing every day in the pursuit of where I'm going, maybe months down the road I might hit a big payday.
There's the one piece, right?
The one piece,
We're at those puzzle
they just
pieces.
tell you, they just start falling in. And I will stress this all the time. Start. There's nothing in the world that pisses me off more than anything is start. If I could tell anybody right now to go back to when I first started in baseball, in the gym, in business, it was the fear of not going. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle. Like, for instance, you know, talking about the kids and social media and all that. That's a whole nother topic we can go into. We can go on for days. But the social media side of, okay, that 12-year-old kid that's looking at that fitness influencer and is like, oh, I need to look like that. Okay, don't get me wrong, back in the day I was a fat boy, so I was a little tough. So my mindset was, okay, well I want to look that way so I can not get bullied anymore. I want to look that way so I can perform well. I want to look that way so I can play college baseball. But, you know, talk about, or what are your opinions on the kids today and social media and trying to achieve something that might be unrealistic?
You know what I think about? I think like on the flip side of that coin, I think a lot of it is like they're intrinsically like branding themselves, right? And like they don't even know it, but that's where society is like, it's literally throwing it in the face of everybody that's on social media, where it's like, okay, you look at like, like Fernando Tatis, right? Guy plays for the Padres,
Right.
shortstop for the Padres, for those of you that don't know, right? Young guy, he's what, 19, 20 years old. He's got the big, I mean, he was one of the first ones to come with the big pit viper glasses. He's playing with the Jays on, right? And so like all of these kids now, if you spend a weekend, which I do all the time now,
You see it firsthand.
right? That you spend a weekend at a baseball park and these 8, 9, 10-year-olds are wearing glasses bigger than their face, right? And they're wearing Jordan shoes. They're wearing like the pants that go above the knee, right? They got all the elbow guards on. It's pop culture, right? It's like what is
What's
cool
true.
right now,
Yeah.
but like it's also like what's, you know, eye-popping. It's branding themselves as saying like, okay, if I'm not in with that, am I getting left behind? And I don't think the kids are like understanding that, but that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what they're sitting in. Like
Like the hype videos, right?
Yeah.
That's a big thing now. Everybody's got to have a hype video. If you had a hype video, we was younger, dude, you were like, this dude's going like,
right
now.
He's getting drafted. Like, out of high school, he's getting drafted.
Yeah. So I think times is changing, man. I think everything is being so marketed, everything's being so commercialized that like it's just you can't help not see it. You can't help not be a part of it. It's just a part of reality now.
I think that also trying to fit into that, like kids are killing their own self-confidence because they're seeing that they're maybe getting left behind because, they're not following the trends of everybody else. That seems good, the bigger picture, like, oh, it seems great, but it's actually not, Because like I think also on the flip side is, say for instance, friend groups with kids, the popular kids at school, you want to be friends with them. So you're going to try and be somebody different. And that is the worst thing to do, is to try and fit in and be somebody who you're not. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to love you for who you truly are. So I think you've got to get to a point where you're okay with allowing the right people in and not being with the cool kids. Because that was a hard thing. That was a hard thing for me.
Me too.
I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be cool. And it's a struggle.
Yeah.
It is.
Until last time I watched the last podcast, I will always be vulnerable, and I'll tell y'all where I went wrong. For a long time, I had that, I'm a fat kid. Let's use nicer words in. I was a heavier kid back in the day. So for me to get, to where I needed to go, look, I'll overly exert myself and try to fit into something that I'm not. So I kind of got myself into a lot of trouble because I was like, let me just do that. If I just acted this way, I can fit in. Or if I just did that thing, if I just, it's always, when does it end? Like, if I keep going, how far does it go?
It's a negative pattern. It's a cycle that is detrimental to yourself, because you will never be fulfilled in doing that. You've got to get out of that pattern, sit down, self-reflect, and be okay with who you are. That's the only way, I think.
But back to this, how much of a fear is that to so many people? Right? Myself included, I went through that stuff too,
Right.
There was a transition period for me in high school where a lot of the guys that, especially early in high school, a lot of the guys that I hung out with in middle school, when they got to high school, the grass was greener on the other side, or whatever saying you want to call it, right? And then I was kind of left on the other side of that. And so,
where do you go from there?
Exactly. So I kind of had to really restart, what you thought was going to be like your boys till the end. It's not the case, right? And just overnight you wake up and it's different.
And you've got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people aren't okay with that.
But you learn from that stuff too, right? Like going back on this stuff, it's like what ultimately makes you who you are.
It's through
And you learn lessons through that. You never thought that you would, but just going through the process of how you live, right? We were talking about that earlier before we started. It's like a lot of people have gone through so much where that they don't know that they've actually gone through it, but you have, and you start looking at it, and it's like, yeah, I did that, whatever. It's like, yeah, but it's not whatever. Like, that's something, like, you have that to build on. You have that to fall back on. Use that going forward. It's a lesson, right? You may be able to apply that in a different way.
That's a healthy strategy. It's to self-reflect and see what you went through, to be okay with being fearful. It's okay to be fearful. Like that just means there's growth on that other side, and you've got to see it as that, and see that, I've been through X, Y, Z. Look where I am now. You've got to visualize that and see that it's okay to go through something that scares you.
Well, to that point, I kind of saw something today preparing for this. It's like, everybody's got things that they need to work on, right? Everybody's got deficiencies or weaknesses or whatever you want to call it. And basically, where you put those, yours are different than mine are different than yours, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's dark spot, like if you're going down a path and you see the dark spots in each path and you see the one light spot, well, that light spot's like your comfort zone, right? The darkest paths, man, are the ones those are your weaknesses and those are your deficiencies that you put there, right? That you have created and have yet to, shine a light on. And so it becomes an internal choice. Like, you have to understand that this dark path is an opportunity. It can be an opportunity, or it can be like, I'm just gonna let this monster grow and grow and grow, and it's gonna be a weakness forever.
David Goggins, you familiar with David
Yeah.
Goggins? Everybody is. If you're not, please go watch it.
If you're not, are you on social media?
So one of the things he talks about is when before he went into the Navy SEALs, he had a lot of demons, is what he called them. He goes, the only way to get to the other side, if there's a wall in front of you, and it's pick that meme of the guy digging, and he stops, but the person that comes behind him finds all the gold. It's the same idea when it comes to, fear or trauma in your past or certain things that hinder you in a certain situation. He talks about where he got to his darkest depths was after he did 2 SEAL trainings. And the first one, he ended up failing, I think. Or no, he ended up passing. Failing or passing, I don't remember. But he said it was the hardest thing in the world. He had to lose over 100 pounds in 3 months to be able to qualify for the SEAL training. So he went, confronted everything he could do to actually lose the weight. So he ended up losing the weight. And then he gets into it. He's the only African American to ever enter SEAL training. So he goes in already with that limitation. Then he has to go through it again a second time, and I think he did it a total of 3 times. And if he didn't pass on the third, you can't take it any more than 3. You have to really confront. It's like a lockbox. I have this safe that's closed like that, and you turn it, that's what I'm looking at. Like, actually open it. A lot of times, on the other side of that fear is something that will actually propel you much further.
That's good.
Talking about videos, some people are just afraid to get behind a camera. When I first started, it's that, well, what if I don't say the right thing? What if I don't? Just do it. If you don't, figure it out. Just go. And I think, especially for today's younger generation, they're looking at, oh, that guy's got a 6-pack. If he doesn't look like that, if I don't, yeah, I gotta get this girl. If I don't look like that, I'll never have anything. If I could distill anything on anyone, it's, yes, you might be feeling like that right now, but get past that feeling and continue to push past it, because that mindset for me held me back for so long. And it could have propelled me much further if I'd have let go of a certain situation, or if I would have not really worried about what people are talking about. And you can only do that through self-reflection. Younger kids, they're coming up in age, so it's harder for them to understand it, and I hope they can this time. But self-reflect. We talked about it last time when I had a huge self-reflection moment on the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
When was a good time, both of y'all, that you really looked at, okay, I'm here right now, what's next? And how did you get through?
So my first year back at UL, right, was a big one for me, and it's the most recent one, or the biggest recent one in my mind. So it's an easy one to go after. So I spent my first 2 years playing at LSU, right, and I transferred my junior year. This was before the transfer portal. This was before the transfer, you get to play right away type deal. I had to sit out a year, right, and so like I'm not hurt, I'm not injured, I don't have anything wrong with me. I just, by rule, I have to sit out. So I go through the appeals process, right? Like I'm trying to get it overturned and for me to play right away. And turns out like I practiced the whole fall, right? And this is in the grand life scheme of things, this is nothing, but it's an easy analogy.
Right? Each moment counts.
So yes, long story short, the appeal gets overturned. I'm sorry, it gets held up, so I can't play. But I go through the whole fall. They let me know the week of opening day. So like it's Monday, right? Team's getting ready to go to Texas that Thursday. And they're like, hey man, you can't play. So I'm like, I practiced the whole time. I am like gutted at this time. So what next? Right? So it's like now, okay, I have to look at it and say, okay, so my goal now is like I want to play someday. And I know that I can. Right? And so I had to internally evaluate myself. It's like, okay, I know like my hitting's not really where I want it to be right now. I have almost a year, right, to get it where I kind of want it to go, so let's start there, right? So like me and another guy, one of our coaches, I mean, it was literally every day, that's all we worked on, and I literally had to start from underneath the house. Again, everything I learned, I'm 21 years old at this point, right? I have 2, maybe 3 years left to play, and I have to like rewire my whole system that I've learned up 20 years from now, right? I have to rewire it in like a year. Long story short, you go and then you play your last one. It would end up being almost 4 years, 3.5 years by the time it was all said and done. Thought it was going to be 2, got a little bit of extra time on the back end, but you learn a lot about yourself, man, when you get put in those situations. Because, you know, Coach Rowe told me, he sat me in his office when he got the ruling, and he's like, look, he said, you know, you can either look at this 2 ways. He said, you can look at it as like a poor me type thing, and he said, you can take this whole year and you can do whatever you want with it, and then a year from now you're going to be the same person that you are today with no growth. Or he said, you can take it as a challenge and say, look, this is what I got to work on. I'm just going to put my nose to the grindstone. And then you look up a year from now and you say, okay, I am not the same person that I was a year, right? But you have to make the choice to do it, right? You have to flip that switch internally and say, oh, this is going to suck for like the first couple months or first couple weeks or whatever it is, but you just have to go and do it.
Have you ever heard the saying, who you are today is who you wish you were 10 years ago?
Never, but I like
I've
it.
always thought of that, man. Like, I mean, I've always tried to be conscious of, I'll say it, I'm a victim of, you know, always wanting to be, you know, somewhere where I'm not right now. You know, like I have this vision of my future self. And a lot of people too, we get so caught up in trying to be that person, and we don't sit down, sit back, and accept and be grateful for where you are. Because like you said, you were wishing where you are now, you wish that 5 years ago. So accept that and keep moving. But actually realize that. I don't think a lot of people sit back enough to realize that. They're caught in the speed of things.
How do you build a house? Brick by brick.
Yeah.
How do you stone pavement? Or concrete? Or how do you lay pavement? That's what I'm going to say. 4 by 4. So, you know, y'all, I love that y'all are touching on this. And, you know, we talked about topics that people don't often want to talk about, but this is a huge problem right now. COVID presented an opportunity for people where they got lazy, where they got, oh, I can't do everything. It was kind of like a skip year. And I don't know if you're Marvel fans, but it's kind of like a time skip where like nothing happened during this year. And at a certain time, you know, we come out of COVID and everybody's like, oh shit, what next? You know, how do you, when it comes to something like, okay, let's go back to that. Were y'all playing during the COVID year?
Yeah.
Y'all were?
Yep.
That was rough.
Yeah, talk about that. Like, cause y'all got an extra year, huh?
Correct. That's how I ended up. Yeah, so when I transferred, when I transferred, it just pushed my clock back 1 year. So you have, when you start, you have 5 years to play 4, essentially. So as soon as you step on campus, boom, your 4-year clock or your 5-year clock starts, right? And in those 5 years, you have to play 4. So when I transferred back, it's like a red shirt, right? You sit out the year, but they give it to you back on the back end. So now I have a 5th-year senior, right? And then COVID gives me another year back, which I was fully expecting at the time to be done. Like, I did not think that the NCAA was going to grant me or us another year of eligibility. So at that point, I was a senior. And so, yeah, we start the season, we're like 15 games in, 16 games in, or whatever it is. We're like, we're rolling at that point. We were playing.
We were getting hot.
We're getting really hot, and we were playing Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina, if you follow baseball now, is like top 10 team in the country, which they have been for the past handful of years, right? Ever since they won it, which when I was at LSU, they came into our super regional and beat us in Baton Rouge. So I knew exactly who Coastal was when I came to UL. I was like, but now they're in my conference, so I got to play them once every year. But so they pull us off the field and they're like, you know, boys, you know, we're going to take 2 weeks off and you know, see how this thing goes. And I remember sitting at home and I see the NBA start canceling, the MLB's canceling, the NFL's pulling their stuff. So it's like, I'm like, man, if all the pro guys are doing it, we're done. Like, we're done. And so, the lockdowns start coming where it's like, okay, you can't leave your house for whatever it was, 6 weeks or a month or however long it was, I don't remember now. And so you try to find ways to like stay, keep your sanity,
Yeah.
because it was just it's just such a mental grind. But I just knew, like, I was always hoping that they were going to give us another year to play, right? And that decision hadn't been made yet. And so in my mind, I'm like, I know I got a lot left in the tank. I was praying for that extra year. And so me and my sister, luckily enough, was still playing volleyball. She played volleyball here at UL too. And so we were both still, chasing, like having to still chase that goal of like being able to play. So I had a workout partner. I had, we did a lot of stuff together. I had a friend that was able to kind of, do a lot of stuff with as much as you could at the house. But it was bad because it was just a mental grind, right? I mean, it was just because you couldn't do anything. You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't use any of the facilities. Your life was literally on halt. And so as a society, how do you react to that, right? But you gotta find a way to just, like, I remember we did workouts with like ice chests, canned goods, like anything with weight on it, we would try to do, pulling four-wheelers, like.
The most Cajun way to
you just try to find a way to do it every day. Sometimes it's not pretty, sometimes it's not fun, sometimes it's not sexy, but you gotta roll with the punches, play the cards you're dealt.
Right.
And then, so after that long period that's a great point I'm about to get into, we'll get to it after, but that period of not playing for that year, and then going back and picking up a bat again, was there a curve that you had to drop down a little bit to get back up in the swing of things again, or were y'all kind of?
It depends on how you took that time off. If you had the discipline to keep staying in the swing of things, then you were good. You were golden. But to those who took it as, okay, I got a little break, there was a dip, and it was noticeable. You could tell who was out of shape just in that small period of time. Who was out of shape, So that just goes to see the determination of your fellow teammates.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad. I'm glad that okay, let me rephrase that. It was a horrible time period for a lot of people. But I think a lot of people realized the potential that it happened for themselves or where they could go with it. I think the percentage was like 40% of people moved their businesses completely online. And then that's when the creative boom, where people started posting more information products, or the knowledge boom happened. The knowledge industry was already a $3 trillion industry, and now it's at like 20. So this whole time gap, as much as it sucked at the moment, for people who are experiencing, some setbacks mentally, they're still struggling from it. We've seen inside of the healthcare facilities some patients who, it's called long COVID. That's the actual sickness. But there's experiences from like the fear of it all happening, the mentality of being isolated, the not being able to see your family, situations that occurred to some families around the same time. And we've seen a lot of things happen inside of the clinics where it's like, okay, well, how can we address that as a community as a whole? And I don't think a lot of people are really addressing that problem, especially for men. Like, men don't like talking about things. If that problem happens to me, it's my problem alone. And there's a book Alyssa and I read. If y'all have significant others, read this book with them. It is Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. It's a great book. It talks about men, they only ask, when they need help, they ask another man for help. But if a woman gives unsolicited advice, we tend to be the dragon, is the terminology, and we snap back. So for men who are like, came out of COVID and enclosed and isolated for a long time, there's this huge shift into, well, crap, now I've got to do something. I got to figure out what's going on. And I don't think a lot of guys out there talk about, I'm a sappy dude, I'll admit it. I like talking about a situation or a problem when it's encountered. For the guy that, keeps things in, what would you say is the easiest way to encounter, like, none of us like talking about our problems. What would you do to confront that situation with your problems?
I would say, kind of sit with it, understand it before you reach out. You know, I'm not the type that's not going to go and ask, you know, for another man's opinion. But there are times where, yeah, I do let things build up, and you know, I'm a victim to that, and it's not that healthy. You just have to come to a point where you're like, you've got to kind of put that pride aside and say, I'm okay with letting that ego go, because that's the only way to solve this issue I'm having is to go and seek help. You know, when you go to the grocery store, you know, and you don't know where anything's at. I go to the grocery store sometimes and I don't have no clue where I'm going. You know, but it's being ignorant to not go and ask the guy who works there, you know, hey, I'm looking for this. He'll show you. You know, that's the biggest thing. Ask God. You know, He knows. Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
I keep everything pretty close. I've always been like that. I whether it's a fault or not, it is what it is. I always keep this in mind. It was again, it's another robism that's going to come out, but it's nothing is ever good or bad. It's how you react to it that makes it good or bad, right? And so like I always look at every situation case by case basis, where it's like, okay, this happened. Okay, I either can go this way, I can go this way, I can do this or that. If I do, what's going to happen if I do both? Or what's going to happen when I do this? What's going to happen when I do this? And I try to find the path of least resistance or the best way forward from there. If I need help, absolutely I'll ask for help. But, you know, I always try to find the best way that I can do it, you know, without burdening others as much as possible.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're running out of time. I appreciate you hopping in today, Brennan. Connor, it's always a pleasure. Could you leave the people with a word of wisdom for today?
I would say embrace it, right, and let it come. And as hard as that is to say, right, and I'm not by any means preaching, right, I'm guilty of not letting that happen myself. But I always try to let it come, and then once it comes, okay, now take a step back, assess the situation. What are the plans of action that I can do? And try to navigate, you know, the best plan of action that you can. Assess it, and then move forward.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. We'll see y'all next week, and we out.